This week on The Futurists, Kevin J. Anderson.
I'm a fanboy at heart, and I enjoyed doing it. And it was like the coolest thing in the world that I got asked to write Star Wars books. And my favorite science fiction book of all time was Dune. And the fact that I'm working with Frank Herbert's son and using Frank Herbert's original notes is like, I can't describe how amazing that is to me.
Welcome back to The Futurists. I am your host, Brett King, and in the hosting chair with me today is Brian Solis, live from, where are you? You're in Florida, aren't you, Brian?
I'm in Irvine.
You're in Irvine.
Coming straight to you from the back seat of a car.
There you go. And we are very fortunate to have the inaugural guest for The Futurists. The very first guest we had. And, I guess a regular on our podcasts over the years now, and a man that I'm fortunate to call not just an acquaintance, but a friend, Kevin J. Anderson, the man, the myth, the legend.
Well, greetings, Brian and Brad. I'm glad to be back here. And I had forgotten I was your first guest.
Yeah, for The Futurists you were, yeah.
Well, you're setting your bar low from the very beginning there, aren't you? But
well, It seems to work. Here we are. We just had our 12th anniversary show. 12th anniversary, 1 year anniversary.
12-month anniversary.
Yes. I made that same mistake on the recording last time, but anyway. And that was attended by your good friend, David Brin.
Yes.
So he was like the second or third guest we had on the show, along with another friend and colleague of yours, Dr. Harry Kloor was one of the early plays on the show, who I met through our joint friend, of course, John Bess. So, but
you just know everybody, Brett. That's just it. You just know everybody.
Well, you know what though, I am. The Futurist has been such a great gateway to really talented people because, we started off with strong guests like yourself and David and others, and so that enabled us to go and ask for really good guests as well, and it's been fantastic. This season, we've booked Peter Diamandis and Dr. Robert Zubrin coming up. We just asked David for an introduction to Kim Stanley Robinson. So fingers crossed, because we'd like to have him on the show, and maybe we'll get maybe some other sci-fi authors. I'd like to have Hugh Howey on to talk about his new TV show Silo that he was involved in, and of course, you've got a couple of new projects you're working on. We have just seen released today, and we're recording this obviously before the show airs, but I just saw the Princess of Dune artwork, which looks fantastic.
It's gorgeous.
And of course, you've been working on the Dune movies as a consultant, which Denis Villeneuve, he's just done such an amazing job of that of the property, and just you can tell that he was obsessive about it in terms of the outcome. But I'm really looking forward to the second part of the movie, or the second. Is there anything you? I won't ask you to give us any spoilers, but I will ask you, how have you felt about the process, seeing it come alive with all of these new technologies and so forth? Being the fact that you've written, was it 14 books in the Dune universe?
Oh, we are now, if you put them all together, in fact, I had to just count them. We're at 21. The Princess of Dune, 21 total. And Princess of Dune is the new one with Brian Herbert. It comes out in October, so just before the movie. And that's kind of a standalone. It's the story of Princess Irulan and Chani, the two very important women in Paul Atreides' life. And their backstory has never been told before. So we kind of use that as the focus. So I'm going to dodge you a little bit because we're, out of respect for Legendary, they want movie out of their own messaging. And I mean, I'll be honest, I say I love the movie. I mean, it was a
well, you can talk about the first movie because it's in the public domain.
Well, it's obviously, but I think that they did great. Speaking of the technology, though, one of the things that, remember, I'm like deep into the bowels of the fandom that everybody picks things and stuff. And one of the constant criticisms that we hear about the old David Lynch movie was that they didn't get the ornithopters right, the little flying dragon. In fact, in that movie, they're just like random spaceships. They just fly around because the special effects tech was just, you couldn't do articulated wings and stuff. Yeah. And when I first saw the legendary movie, Denis Villeneuve's, when we first saw those ornithopters and they spread their wings, we all said, yes, that's perfect. Yeah. And I got to say, my experience on that, we saw the debut. I was with the big writers group. We were down in Hollywood at the time for another writers conference, and they had set up so that we were able to screen the film on opening day at the Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard.
Amazing.
And you just can't get better than that. It was just so awesome experience in a room full of other science fiction writers, and we had some other filmmakers there, and we even had a very good friend of mine who's the drummer for Jethro Tull. So we just had a fantastic audience on that. And as you said, the cover art for Princess of Dune just was released today. That we were going to like send out a newsletter and kind of have a big grand introduction of it, but they posted it on Amazon, and of course some fan found it in 93 seconds and posted it everywhere. So now we've shared it and it's all there, and I'm very happy. And it's and in fact, not half an hour before I came on your show here, I finished proofreading all of the 400 pages of Princess of Dune, so that we got it back and marking the last round of typos, the last round of commas, and you know, I know fans are waiting to read this book, but I've read it about 11 times.
Yeah, it gets like that, doesn't it? This was interesting because you and I were chatting about this a few weeks ago, that the fact that you proofread on printouts, because I've done most of my proofreading in the Word document. Sent back and forth between me and my editor, but the fact that you print it out, you say that you pick up a lot more that way, right?
Well, for the very final time, when it's all typeset and it looks the way a book is supposed to look, I like to hold it and read it in paper. And frankly, for all the great stuff that technology does, there is still really no better way to mark up a typo than to use your pen and like cross out a word. That if you're having it in like a PDF reader and you have to insert a comment and do that stuff, it's just a lot more tedious than for me to just like scribble out a word.
Better.
And also I just think that there's so much distraction on a screen, and I like to just take the paper with me and maybe relax in my nice high back leather chair, or maybe in a nice warm tub in the evening or something. That's just kind of, it's more of a, and I swear to you, that's the last time I'm going to read that book, because it's been through 11 times already. And I want to do it kind of the right way when I proofread it. And I even have, I read it with like a ruler on it so that I can keep my eyeballs on the right line and just make sure, because this isn't reading it like a reader to enjoy the story. This is like being a proctologist, digging into the very deepest of everything,
very academic,
studying it and x-raying it and making sure that no typos get through. And of course, the moment it's published actually on the bookshelves, we'll find a bunch more typos that we all miss.
I did have one very kind commenter who came back after I published one of my books with all of the edits where I had spelt things with British spelling instead of American spelling, which was helpful. I'm a couple of things. First of all, please extend to Brian our congrats on his work. And if you guys would like to come on for the launch of Princess of Dune or something, please avail yourself of our support however you can. But the other one question I had was, and I do want to get onto the Kickstarter stuff because that was what we were going to talk about.
Sure.
How you're using that as a tool. But I am interested, even though you've done these 21 books in the Dune universe, do you ever find yourself needing to go back over older books and read them to just make sure you've got the canon right, the specific details about the characters?
Oh, absolutely. We had done so many books. When we started, I think our first one was published in 1998 or so. I should have looked it up before I started, but when we first started, that we were writing a Dune book pretty much every year. That was kind of our thing, that we worked on it. And we did the House Atreides trilogy, which is the prequel. It's the story of Duke Leto and Lady Jessica and the sort of the generation before Dune. And then we did a trilogy that's 10,000 years before Dune. It's the Butlerian Jihad. It's the war against the thinking machines and establishes everything. And we did that. And then we did some other stuff, and we kept working our way through. And then after we finished a trilogy with Sisterhood of Dune and Mentats of Dune and Navigators of Dune, we just went, okay, we just really need to take a break and just take a few years off. And boy, did that screw up our momentum, because then when we came back to do another book like 5 years later, it was all like, oh, when we used it all the time, we remembered everything. So then I had to go back and reread. At the time, I think it was like 15 books. I reread them all, wow, just kind of load it all back up into my head. And so then we did a trilogy called the Caladan trilogy, which is like the year before Dune, and now we're doing this standalone called Princess of Dune. So it's they're all like tied very closely to the movies, the time period of the movies, but it's so intricate, and what Frank Herbert created was such a massive and complex universe that one thing we didn't also mention is that Brian and I adapted Frank Herbert's original novel Dune into a 3-volume graphic novel for Abrams.
Right. Yes.
And that won all kinds of awards, was New York Times bestseller. And
I have a copy of it back here somewhere. So.
It was recently put on the what was it, like the top 100 best graphic novels of all time or something like that.
Congratulations.
But one of the really amazing, and I've read Dune probably 25 times. I mean, I've read it over and over and over again. But doing this graphic novel, which is we didn't feel arrogant enough that we wanted to adapt Frank Herbert's stuff and make it better. We did a scene-by-scene adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel. And that made me kind of use a scanning electron microscope on Dune, like paragraph by paragraph, and how everything is set up. And it's just astonishing about how complicated it is. And I still found things that I had never noticed before, even after I've read it that many times. So in summary, I think Dune is pretty cool.
Yeah. How long did it take him to write that novel? Do you know?
I knew at one time.
I don't know if it's a matter of record, but.
Well, Brian wrote a very detailed biography of his father called Dreamer of Dune, where he goes through the whole process, and there were many different drafts and iterations of it, and nobody would publish it. I got like 26 rejection slips before somebody finally took it, and that's a whole story in itself. It was published by Chilton Books, which only published auto repair manuals, but the editor was bored with auto repair manuals, and he liked science fiction, so he took a chance on this unpublishable book, and the rest is history.
Wow. Oh, that's very interesting. So one of the things that we've talked about recently is the fact that you've got a new Dan Shambles,
yes.
The zombie detective, which I don't know how that works because I haven't read any of the Dan Shambles books, which I'm going to go and do after this. But as part of this, you've been more recently adopting the use of Kickstarter to help you with some of your projects. And I know the Dune graphic novel has been part of the Kickstarter universe, wasn't it, or was it just a giveaway on Kickstarter as part of a?
I think there was a different graphic novel, just the movie adaptation graphic novel that the film company did. Brian and I weren't really involved in that one, but they did go through Kickstarter on that. But let me give some background. So the Dan Shambles series is, we were talking about these big epic Dune science fiction things, and I've written my own huge space operas. I know you've read my Saga of Seven Suns books, and I'm kind of known for killing enormous numbers of trees by making paper for massive books like that, and giant epic science fiction. And I've done big, serious, epic fantasy like Game of Thrones, only I finished mine, but that's a different conversation entirely. And after doing a lot of these giant things, I sometimes felt that I just kind of wanted to do something that was more whimsical and humorous. And so I developed this whole series that it's kind of like The Naked Gun meets the Addams Family. It's like, it's really silly. It's full of stupid puns. It's ridiculous. It's in a world where all of the monsters have come back, the vampires and mummies and ghouls and werewolves and everything, and zombies. And this guy, his name is Dan Shambles, and he's just a private investigator, because even monsters, a human private investigator, but even monsters, they still get divorced, and they still have estate issues, and they still have problems that they need a PI for. And he's got a bleeding heart human lawyer as his partner, and they're like working with all these unnaturals and doing like a mummy comes into the office one day, and he's suing the museum because he wants to be emancipated, that he's a person, not property, damn it. And there's a vampire who needs protection because he sees wooden stakes everywhere and like fence posts, and he thinks somebody's trying to kill him. And it's just, it's really silly, and it's really funny. And I like being funny. I like doing stupid stuff, and they're just a joy to write. And so I wrote the first one, and we sold the series to a traditional publishing house, and they eventually published the first 4, and they did some things that I didn't think was the right way to be marketing them. You know, I've done tons of marketing on my own. I'm kind of a publicity powerhouse. I got my own fan base. I've got all kinds of things.
Publishing house. Yeah.
I've got my own publishing house that I've had since like 2009. And these are really fun books. They're short, they're fast, they're funny, and they're the kind of things that when you read one, you want to pick up the next one pretty soon. And the other publisher wanted to bring them out like every 18 months. And I said, well, that's not a way to build an audience in it. And anyway, long story short, that they published 4 of them. And with my own publishing house, I did the first short story collection. And eventually they decided that they didn't want to continue it. And I decided that I did want to continue it. So I wrote the next book and published it in my own publishing house. It's called Tastes Like Chicken. And it came out. And then I did another story collection, and then, but I've got all my Dune books that I'm doing, and I've got, I had Star Wars work, and I've got big epic fantasies that I was doing.
Yeah, that's right.
And frankly, these were kind of smaller. They were just from my publishing house. And I really wanted to continue it, but it was hard to justify until kind of the light bulb went on, and Kickstarter changed everything. So I knew a lot of authors who had been successful for it in doing crowdfunding, and I decided to take a chance. It was almost exactly a year ago when I ran my first one for a brand new Dan Shambles novel, because I wanted to continue the series, and I thought, well, the fans seem to want it, so let's see if they'll actually support it. Let's see if they'll put their money where their mouth is. And so I put up this campaign that I wanted to get new covers because I didn't really like the old covers. And I had some artists who were doing things. And I just said, well, I put up this campaign and let's see where it goes. And the sucker funded at 23 times what my goal was. And I just went, wow. And it was doing my math here, it was something like 3 or 4 times the most that the traditional publisher had ever paid me for one of these books. So I went, this is a whole different ballgame now, because I am used to working with my fans. I interact with them all the time. I know you're on a bunch of my Facebook, see my Facebook posts.
Of course, yeah.
I'm on a newsletter. I'm on Twitter. I go to conventions all the time. I meet the fans. I sign autographs. I give talks. I give writing workshops. I'm pretty well attuned to my own fan base. Right. And so instead of, in the old days of traditional publishing, well, current, what they would do is they'd publish a book and they would just sort of throw it out there and hope that it would find the right readers. Well, when I'm doing it myself, I know my right readers.
Right.
I'm connected with all of them. I interact with all of them. And when I say, hey, guys, you want a new Dan Shambles book? Or because I haven't written one in a few years, and do you want one or not? And boy, did they ever. The way that came out, it was just so gratifying for me, because I love this series. And this was the first Dan Shambles book in like 4 years.
It allows you to do something that you can't normally do, right?
Well, and so the way that it's a game changer, and so I did another one this past February. I had another comedy one called The Dragon Business. It was sort of like The Princess Bride meets Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It's a gang of medieval con men, and they sell their services as dragon slayers, but there's no dragon. They just put fake giant footprints around, and they burn a few peasant hovels down, and then they tell the king for 100 pieces of gold they'll go kill that dragon for him, and it's all a setup. It is a con, and it's really funny. And of course, there is a dragon. And then, so I had written that one back in like 2010, and I've always wanted to go back, but again, it was published, and they didn't want another one, and I got the rights back, so I reprinted it at my own Wordfire Press. And I thought, let's see if the fans want a sequel to The Dragon Business. And again, bam, it funded in 33 minutes, and we ended up with 23 times what we asked for. And it was like way more than the other publisher had ever paid me. And I went, this is kind of a cool way to do things. And so let me actually step back, and because not everybody knows how publishing works or how writing works. Like in the old traditional days, which, it's how I broke into the business, how I made it. The way it worked was a publisher, say Bantam Books or HarperCollins or whatever, that if they wanted me to write a book, I would sell them, here's my proposal. They would buy the book. They would pay me a chunk of money, which was my advance. And that was the money with which I paid my bills and lived on during the year or whatever it took me to write the book. And then once the book got published, I started earning royalties on it, and eventually it might earn its advance back. But that all changed when the indie publishing movement came, that people could publish their own books, that they could do their own covers and do their own typesetting, and they would hire editors and do it all, and then sell the books on Amazon or wherever. Well, the problem with that is they don't get any money up front, and you have to pay for everything up front, and you don't get any money until you've got it published and for sale, and then the royalties start trickling in.
Yeah, you can use Kindle Direct Publishing, but that's, it's limited to that platform, and
and you can do that, or you can go to Barnes and Noble. There's all sorts of different platforms, and that's not hard. But the problem is you have to do all your work. You have to write the whole book. Yeah. Before, I would get paid up front. This way, you have to write it all and get it all completely done, and then put it up. But Kickstarter is, like I said to you in one of our messages, this is like venture capital for the common man or woman. That I can go to my fans and say, look, I want to do another Dan Shambles book. And if you'll front me some of the money, we can pay for the artwork, and can pay for the editing, and we can pay for, if they want a print book, I can run off hardcover copies or trade paperback copies and whatever. And so I've just have launched while we're recording this. It's been up for about a week. I've launched for a new Dan Shambles novel called Bats in the Belfry, and it's been out. It's been a year since I did a Dan Shambles book, so it's time for the next one. And well, obviously it's a sales pitch, but I also would love people to just look and see what we did. You go to Kickstarter.com and put my name in, you'll see the previous ones that are all over, but you can still look at them. But I very cleverly put kevinjanderson.com, and that will point directly to the Kickstarter campaign. So if
great. That's easy.
look at kevinjanderson.com, you can see what Bats in the Belfry is. And it's just a lot of fun, and I can watch what you can see what the backers want. Do they want, so they can back at like $7 for the ebook or $20.
Well, you could even maybe write them in for the top donations and stuff.
Oh,
right?
there's we gotta, and this often fills up. I put in for $300. I will write you in as a character, so you get your name. So you might be a zombie that gets his head cut off. Or
awesome.
Be a victim that the werewolf.
I got to do that.
Like that. Well, there are like 3 left, I think, on this one, but it is funny, and the fans just love it. In fact, I've got one who backed last year's Kickstarter for Dan Shambles, who had his name in, and he just loved it so much. He backed it again and paid for that and said, "Could you bring my character back as a recurring character?" And so he's kind of a main part of this new novel, Bats in the Belfry. And but I when you look at this campaign, because every one of your listeners is going to go and look at the campaign, but when you look at the campaign, it's really pretty slick. I mean, all of my artwork is done, and I've got videos on there, and I've got boxed sets that I'm showing off and everything. And that does kind of show you how the entire Kickstarter universe has changed a little bit, because now it's really sort of in the big leagues. That right. It was originally set.
I want to get into some of the mechanics of like how you figured this out and so forth. But before that,
I think that's a good pause for a break, and we'll pick this up in just a moment. Thank you for listening to The Futurists with Kevin J. Anderson. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Provoke Media is proud to sponsor, produce, and support the Futurist podcast. Provoke.fm is a global podcast network and content creation company with the world's leading fintech podcast and radio show, Breaking Banks. And of course, its spin-off podcast, Breaking Banks Europe, Breaking Banks Asia Pacific, and the FinTech 5. But we also produce the official Finovate podcast, Tech on Reg, Emerge Everywhere, the podcast of the Financial Health Network, and Next Gen Banker. For information about all our podcasts, go to provoke.fm or check out Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show.
Thank you for listening to The Futurists. Welcome back to our conversation with the one and only Kevin J. Anderson. But before we get back into conversation, especially around Kickstarter, because we have so many questions, I'm going to turn it over to Brett to lead our quick fire round.
Absolutely. So, Kevin, this is something we like to do to help our listeners get to know you a little better. I hope you'll enjoy it. So here's a few quick questions. This is the lightning round.
All right.
What was the first science fiction you remember being exposed to?
It was The War of the Worlds, the movie The War of the Worlds. When I was a little kid, I was 5 years old, and my parents foolishly let me watch it, and I just sat wide-eyed all the time, and
that was it.
That was it.
Absolutely. What technology do you think has most changed humanity?
Wow. And it's just all been in my lifetime. It's so much. I'm looking now at how much AI is changing us in the last month. I mean, that's going to be a huge thing. But I'm thinking, humanity, you'd be going back to like electricity in the wheel and stuff like that. But I think right now, the fact of our smartphones that are basically the Star Trek tricorder that we can all
supercomputers in our pocket,
that is changing everything that we do, from GPS to databases to taking photos. And I sometimes forget that you can actually still make phone calls with them too.
I often quote that today's basic smartphones are more powerful than a Cray 2 supercomputer, which was $30 million, back when it was launched. So we're carrying these $30 million supercomputers around in our pocket. What do? We take selfies and play Angry Birds, right? So
and TikTok, Brett.
And TikTok. Don't forget TikTok. All right. name a futurist or an author or an entrepreneur that has influenced you, and why?
Well, that's got to go right back to Frank Herbert. He was one of the original people that I thought of as a futurist rather than a science fiction writer, because this guy had just so many visions of the future. And remember, Dune was written in 1963, I think.
Right.
Nobody thought about ecology then. Nobody thought about water despotism and limited resources. It was all ray guns and rocket ships and bug-eyed monsters. But Dune, just Frank's mind just made me think about politics and religion and economics, which were not things I had really thought about before when I was reading. So got to be
interesting. Yeah. Here's a good one. What's the best prediction a futurist or science fiction author, writer, creator has made in your estimation?
Well, I can think of one that I always point to in the opposite sense, in that one of the biggest things Isaac Asimov got wrong is he thought computers were going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as they got more powerful. Remember that he had computers, the most powerful ones were the size of planets and smaller and smaller and smaller. I don't really read science fiction for what somebody's predicting, but I'm lightning round and I'm giving you long answers. But this is kind of interesting because you mentioned David Brin before, and David and I a few years ago were at the U.S. Air Force Academy because they had they brought in some science fiction writers as basic visionaries to just think of stuff, and it was you sitting around just doing kind of working groups and making up things, and this was at the time, I believe, of the first Iraq War. And there was so much trouble with all these American troops going over there, and they didn't speak the language and they didn't understand the culture, and there was all kinds of unnecessary clashes. And I made the comment on one of our groups. I said, what would really help is if we had like a Star Trek universal translator, so that if our soldiers went in somewhere, that they could actually talk into something and the locals would understand us. I have my $3 million supercomputer telephone right now because we went to the Czech Republic a year ago, and I do not speak Czech, but I could speak into the which I have several different translator apps, and I could set it for Czech, and I could say what I wanted, and it would say what I wanted to the doorman at our hotel who didn't speak any English, and I am still just totally blown away by that because it removes the language barrier. It's amazing.
Brent, before you go into your next question, there's a startup founded by two Apple geniuses that just debuted an AI-based translator. One of the things that they're going to be introducing that they demoed at this year's TED, and essentially it learns from you. You speak in real time, and it is translating in real time.
Wow.
in your voice. It learns how to speak
in an alternate language. Yeah, that's insane.
Well,
the company's called Humane.
I was guest speaker in Beijing at the China National Science Fiction Convention a few years ago, and I was giving this talk, and I went, "Well, how are they going to know what I'm saying?" Because the audience is literally full on Chinese, and very few of them spoke English. And they had up on the big screen,
had the algorithm.
They had an AI translating just real time what I was saying, and I kind of glanced over and I went, there were a few glitches, but certainly the gist of it.
Yeah, no, I've done the same. Baidu and Tencent both have that tech in China. It's pretty cool to watch. All right, last one for the lightning round. What science fiction story is most representative of the future that you hope for?
Oh, well, it wouldn't so much be a story, but I think the Star Trek future is the one that I would like the best. The Federation and the exploration ships and all these races mostly living in harmony, and people exploring things and helping each other out, and their economics are kind of I never quite understood the economics of Star Trek, because if you have a replicator to make everything, then what do you do to make money or get paid? But I like the optimistic technophilic future.
Right.
Remember, I've written tons and tons of Star Wars, and I love Star Wars, but that's kind of a technophobic culture that nothing really works, and you got to bang on the Millennium Falcon to get it to start, and turn off the computer so that you can use.
It's definitely not a techno utopia.
Yeah. So I would like to live on the Enterprise C.
Awesome. Well, there is one thing you can't replicate, which is gold plus latinum, which is why they use it as currency for the Ferengis.
That was one of the things I couldn't quite figure out. I know that
there you go.
They had it, and I went, well, okay, but but we don't analyze it too much.
I have a keynote I give on what science fiction tells us about the future of money, economics, and banking and finances. So I should send you a link to that because I think you'd enjoy it.
Well, most science fiction writers don't have two pennies to rub together, so I'm not sure.
Hey, Brett, I was just thinking too about an interesting, going back to Kevin J. Anderson's point about the War of the Worlds inspiring him, and thinking about how, if H.G. Wells was a futurist, the interesting way that he ends the book around Martians and dying from everyday diseases, and certainly a precursor to what I think we started to get back in touch with in our own mortality, and as well, you're thinking about the premise of The Last of Us, and certainly how that series opens up. it felt a little close to home.
Well, and Wells was really a visionary in that the Martians, you don't really think about this too much because it's overwhelmed by other things, but the Martian race evolved so that they're basically a bunch of large brains with very feeble tentacles. So they had to build external machines to do the things that they wanted. And they're basically, the Martians are riding in their tripods and their little cars. And then Wells also explored evolution and genetics in the island of Dr. Moreau. And another thing people don't give him credit for with the time machine, which still traveling in time is a bit strange, but he knew in the time machine, he doesn't go back in time and try to see the Renaissance or whatever, because he didn't want to mess with paradoxes. So time machine only goes into the future. And I mean, we're getting off.
Although the 2002 adaptation did have him trying to, the movie had him trying to go back in the past to rescue his wife, but a really elegant explanation given by the chief Morlock or whatever, because I just watched this movie the other day, was that but he only created the time machine because his wife had died. So that was the paradox, and that's why he couldn't change the past, which I thought was a very elegant explanation, actually, of that, why you couldn't change the past. But anyway, that's
if I could interject there, actually, if we can go back in time, one of the things I would love to talk about is Kickstarter.
Well, we didn't. So we didn't get to finish that conversation. So go ahead, Brian.
Master of the segue.
Well, you were speaking about just your experiences in Kickstarter, and super humbled to hear how you've connected your fan base to your projects. Brett and I are, I wouldn't say we're traditional authors, but we're certainly beholden to traditional publishers. And I'd love to hear more about the story, and certainly love to hear about your friend who just made the record books as well.
I'd love to. So let me go back a little bit, because the fundamental reason for Kickstarter was that you're going to have these ambitious and visionary creatives who basically needed some startup capital, that they needed some money in hand so that they could live while they're writing their book. And it's not all about books. There's games and there's artwork and comics and all kinds of things that are sort of out of the reach, out of the financial. Let me say this better. The production of what they had in their imagination was out of the reach of their basic finances. Say you've got a brilliant artist who wants to do a gorgeous graphic novel. Well, that's a significant investment to get all the art done and the printing and everything. And so Kickstarter was basically started as here I'm a creative, here's my vision, I want to produce this book, this artwork, this whatever. So will you please help support me? And people would not donate, they're investing in it's the futures market of this creator. And so they would give the creator money, and then at some point the project would be done and they'd all get their copy. It's like they get a sneak preview on it. Well, kind of one of the ways that backfired was a lot of people never actually finished what they promised to do.
Right.
People
I
didn't
remember that.
get what they thought of. And so it's now become more and more imperative that if you're going to do this, you got to be serious about it. You've got to show your stuff up front. If you go to the campaign I've got running right now, the kevinjanderson.com, if you go there right now, that's not me just starting this book. All of the cover art is done. I've just this morning, I finished writing the draft of this novel. I've got another, the whole set done. I've got everything pretty much ready to go before I even ask the backers to support it, because they're naturally skeptical of a lot of these projects that, well, is he ever going to really finish it? Well, I can tell them from the get-go that it's already done. You can see the art's already there. It's a big dog and pony show production to get it going. And I do want to mention, about a year ago, my friend, big fantasy writer Brandon Sanderson, he launched a Kickstarter, and he had done several before, so he knew what he was doing, and he built up. He had a couple that had gone over $1 million for his books that he was doing. Well, a year ago, he broke every Kickstarter record in existence, and his Kickstarter campaign for, I think it was 5 books that he had written during the COVID lockdown, he made $42 million for his Kickstarter campaign. So
that's just
that's like startup territory. That's a lot of money.
But he's a full-on big business. However, I'm a pretty big deal too. I'm a pretty big business too. And what I would put a challenge, though, Brett, to all of your listeners, I think that we can break Brandon Sanderson's record if each one of your listeners just puts in $100,000 to my campaign, and we go over. I think, or it could be like
definitely
$500,000,
feasible.
whatever.
This.
If you just
so you heard that. If you've got to spare $500,000, go to kevinjanderson.com.
But I mean, that was kind of the Brandon's was kind of the outlier that everybody just went, holy cow, this is big business. That it isn't just a bunch of desperate authors looking for a handout. This is a genuine, viable, game-changing way for creatives to do their book, their comic, their artwork. And as I was telling you my story about the Dragon business and about the Dan Shambles series, Kickstarter brought them back to life. If it wasn't for Kickstarter, I wouldn't be writing these books. And Kickstarter, a lot by the fans supporting what I want to do, gives me the ability to write the book that I really want to write, instead of what can I sell to the big publisher that their marketing people think is the best thing.
Yeah, you know what else I like about that story is that it connects you to your community in a way that isn't just transactional, in a way that isn't just, say, disconnected, but more connected in the sense that it's a funding project for sure, but it's also an investment in you and also in the investment in a relationship. So it becomes collaborative.
Could we drill down on that a bit, Kevin? I mean, you do a lot of stuff in the community. You're involved with the Hollywood Writers. You're heading out to the West Coast often. You work in writing programs at universities and so forth. But and you attend all of these Dragon Cons and Comic Cons and so forth.
Absolutely.
A lot of people, when they look at what you've done on Kickstarter, they say, well, I could never do that. I've not got the fan base, but you work at it. You do a ton of work to keep your fans engaged and so forth. Could you just talk about that a bit? Because as we get closer to the end of the show, I must say your work ethic here is very clear. You churn out. How many books a year do you write on average?
Well, I'm slowing way down. It's more like 4 books a year or something like that. But I'm also writing monthly comics, and I'm teaching a graduate program in publishing, running writing seminars.
When you say slowing down, it's relative, right?
There was a time in like the mid 90s, especially when I was writing for Star Wars. Yeah. I think I had 12 books in one year.
Wow. And great to see Timothy Zahn just got his trilogy or whatever relit or lit for production, right? So,
and they're inserting his characters into some of the other Star Wars stories and stuff. Right. So my first Star Wars was in 1993, I think, was my very first one, and it thrills me to pick up a copy right now to see it, and it says like 49th printing on inside the cover.
In fact, the first book of yours I read was a Star Wars adaptation. So there you go.
Well, to get to what you were saying though, is that this. You see my Kickstarter, like I said, that we funded in 9 minutes and all that kind of stuff. And I worked really hard in building the campaign. But this is something, it's a result that I've been priming my audience for 25 years. I mean, just by paying attention to my fans, by sending them newsletters and answering all the email. And in fact, in a Kickstarter campaign, to keep the momentum going, you put stretch goals. And when you get close to a certain dollar amount, you say, hey, if we pass this, then I'll give you another free ebook or another, some perk. And our next stretch goal that we've got on this one is an exclusive private Zoom hangout call with me. So nice. If it has a certain funding level, then I'll schedule like an hour on a Saturday morning, and only the backers of the Kickstarter program get the Zoom link.
Wow!
I sit there and I interact with them. They ask me questions, and we chat and we talk about it, and they love that because it's their access. And in fact, one of the ways that I love to show Kickstarter is that this is not I'm a desperate writer, I need some money, but it's more like an exclusive backstage club. It's VIP all access pass that if you back the Kickstarter, then you get to, and also they get to read the book 3 or 4 months before I release it to the general public.
Well, that is a big advantage.
They get it out first, and then they can get their name as a character in it, and it's sort of a real intimate, personal relationship with the fans, rather than like if Bantam Books published my Star Wars books. So they printed those books and they all got sent out to 1 million bookstores all over the place, and fans would go in and buy them. But there's no direct connection between me and them at that point. They'll come and see me at a convention or something. But the Kickstarter, because I message them directly and they write me and they feel like they're vested because they're my pool of investors on getting the new Dan Shambles book out. That they're awesome. Part of the team and they feel
they're part of the team. That's definitely a great way to put it together. But my point was that if people look at you and think that that this is luck, that you've built this platform as an author, the reality is you do a ton of work all the time, and you've been very consistent over decades, and that's a large part of your, quote unquote, overnight success, right?
Yeah. Well, one of my things I think it's the motto on my website is the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I've had people go, "Oh, I could be that successful if I was as lucky as you," and I'm like, "Yeah, try being lucky for 20 years," and but. I don't want to like beg for sympathy that I work so hard. I love doing it.
You clearly enjoy it. You clearly enjoy it. Which
I can't imagine. I go to Dragon Con and it's the time of my life that this isn't like, I have to go and meet the fans. I'm a fanboy at heart and I enjoy doing it. Mm-hmm. And it was like the coolest thing in the world that I got asked to write Star Wars books. And my favorite science fiction book of all time was Dune. And the fact that I'm working with Frank Herbert's son and using Frank Herbert's original notes is like, I can't describe how amazing that is to me. And now that I'm the Kickstarter is letting me do the books that I want to do, and
it's amazing.
It's just I'm loving this, and it's
well, congratulations. It's quite a run. Well, we're running out of time, but I'll just get your comments quickly before we finish off. Any thoughts about what's happening with the writers' strike in Hollywood right now, and just generally, the role of AI moving forward? You talk about cover artwork and things like that. There are tools that are clearly coming to maturation very quickly that could be used. I think, as a writer myself, there's some elements of like research and synthesis, particularly from on the nonfiction side, from a data perspective, that where I may use AI, but I still want my voice in the writing, so I'm not going to delegate that to an AI. But are you starting to experiment with any of these tools yourself, or how do you think it might change the landscape?
I'm keeping my eyes on it, and I'm curious, and frankly, I'm too busy to spend too much time dabbling with it. But I mean, there are people who are terrified of it. There are artists and writers who are just absolutely terrified. But it's kind of like we've seen how technology evolves and fills whatever niches it can. So I don't think it's realistic to just say AI is bad, let's just not use it anymore, because that's not going to happen. I feel that all the people, all the horse buggy whip manufacturers were made obsolete because of autocars, or even a more recent example. If you'll remember, there used to be a video store on every block, the Blockbuster Video or whatever. You go and get your VHS tapes, and that just, like, within a year, they just disappeared. And so I feel for those people, but I don't know what you can do about it. What I'm really, look, there will always be like the genius Pulitzer Prize winning person that's got the only person who could ever write that poem or that lyrical novel or something is that person. That there are some writers that are just geniuses. I think I tell a pretty good story with good characters. I wouldn't put myself in genius territory, but let's go a step further down. There are writers who spend a lot of their career writing what, and I mean no disrespect, but kind of like cookie cutter, identical novels. There are the obvious one is kind of like the monthly Harlequin romance novels, or science fiction, adventure, military science fiction that they just, the readers want a new one every other day, or they want one every week, and they're kind of formulaic. But there are lots of people who write those books and make a living at it. Mm-hmm. I think those kind of books an AI could probably do quite adequately.
Yeah,
certainly in a year or two.
Especially if you train a language model based on your previous books. There's more than enough there to get your style and so forth that you can use.
Or even just feed in. And again, I'm not picking on Harlequin romances because they're just kind of the one that we can all grasp. If you feed an AI 500 Harlequin romance paperbacks, you don't think it can generate ones that most of the readers won't notice the difference?
Yeah, it's true.
And I feel sorry for the writers who make their living doing that, because now they're suddenly out of the job. But I don't know what else. I don't think it's realistic to just say this is bad, we have to stop it, because it's going to be there. I think we need to learn how to use it,
adapt,
huge
and augment. Right. I mean, Brett, that's your book, Augmented. I think about real quick. There's the one thing that's very clear listening to you, or Brett, just our friendship going back years. There's an electricity to you that generative AI is never going to be able to pick up. But even if I asked it to write in your voice with a small language model based on all of your bodies of work, might be able to get to the style, but it's your electricity. It's your unique you that you bring to the table. And that, I think, is our our greatest defense, but also our greatest asset in augmenting with AI. And that I know many writers who are out there on the picket lines, and they have some of the cleverest signs I've ever read too, because demonstrating their unique talent and perspective of the world, and all of the emotions and life experiences, good and bad, that have made them who they are, to give them that unique voice. I'm a hopeless optimist, as you know, Brad, and I do see challenges, and I do see lazy decision makers out there who are going to try to profit on some of this stuff. So we do.
I mean, look, you can get plenty of stuff that's written today that's just churn the handle stuff. So it's not, I mean, I don't think that's going to be, it might be better quality actually with AI. But as you say, Kevin, you've got a fan base, and they come because of your universes you've created for them, and I think that's still important.
Well, and kind of to tie back to the Kickstarter, what might happen is I have to go to my fan base and run Kickstarters so that I can keep writing artisanal Kevin written.
Right, exactly.
That it'll be a specialty handmade thing rather than the mass produced thing.
Written by a human.
Yeah. But this even though I'm 61 now, but I'm still writing as fast as I can, and I'm still doing all kinds of other things. But I think that we still need to learn and adapt, and I guess I'd be. I know we're trying to wrap up. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention another project with your friend Brett John Best.
Of course,
that we're also working on a Saga of Seven Sons board game.
Ah, wow!
And we've got
is this an exclusive?
We have not announced it anywhere before, but it's relevant here in that. We've already got our plans set up that we will be doing some sneak previews and demos, but we will be funding the board game through a Kickstarter campaign, because we can get the funds we need, because manufacturing.
As long as I get to play as an Elydrian.
Well, you might be able to, or we'll find something for you to do. But anyway, it just goes back. There are games, there are comics, there are books, there are everything that this Kickstarter has been a game changer for how I am now approaching my future projects. And
awesome.
Again, hope you look at
we do appreciate certainly the fact you've given us your time and given us some insight into this. If you want a masterclass on how to, as an author, how to, be a working author, then there's no better example in my view than Kevin. So, and great work. Kevin, how do people follow the Kickstarter stuff? You've mentioned kevinjanderson.com, but how else can they follow your musings?
Yeah, well, kevinjanderson.com will just point to the Kickstarter for the next, it's over on June 7th or 8th, so you don't wait too long. But I've got Wordfire.com, my company, Wordfire.com, that'll take you to kind of my basic stuff. And I'm on Facebook, just look for official Kevin J. Anderson and you'll find it. And I'm on Twitter with the handle, the word the, and then my initials, the KJ. So, and
of course, we can also find not only your books, but Rebecca Moesta's books on Wordfire.com.
My wife, well. We've written 38 books together, and we've been married 31 years, and we're still married.
Collaboration
books. And anyway, I guess so. I have wordfireshop.com. That's our online store if anybody wants autographed books and stuff.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great way to finish. And thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure. Go to thekja.com or wordfire.com to find out more about Kevin. And don't forget to check out his new Kickstarter campaign on kevinjanderson.com for Bats in the Belfry, The Cases of Dan Shambles Zombie PI. That's the new project. So Kevin J. Anderson, thank you for joining us once again on The Futurists.
I appreciate it. Great to see you. We'll have to do it again in a year or
absolutely. Yeah. Well, let's see if you and Brian want to come on, for the launch of The Princess of Dune, because that'd be, I know you'll be doing a lot of press around that time, of course, but if you want to get some coverage of that, we'd be happy to host you. That's it for The Futurists this week. Make sure you let us know what you think. of the show. If you've got other guests that you'd like us to invite or other topics you'd like us to cover, please jump in and let us know through social media. And of course, leave us a review on iTunes or podcast or Stitcher or Google Play or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to the show. And that all helps people find the content. My thanks go out to Brian Solis for joining today, and of course our guest Kevin, and to the team at Provoke, including Kevin Hirschon, our audio engineer, Lisbeth Severance, Carlo, Sylvie, and the entire team at Provoke. That's it for the Futurists this week, but we will see you in the future.
Well, that's it for the Futurists this week. If you like the show, we sure hope you did. Please subscribe and share it with the people in your community. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. That really helps other people find the show. And you can ping us anytime on Instagram and Twitter at Futurist Podcast for the folks that you'd like to see on the show or the questions that you'd like us to ask. Thanks for joining. And as always, we'll see you in the future.